This is the day, Judah. It's between us now.
Yes, this is the day.
So you think you could survive a day in ancient Greece or Rome? Think again. If you somehow found yourself waking up in the middle of Athens in the 5th century BCE or the bustling streets of Rome in the time of Caesar, the odds are not in your favor. Forget Instagram, antibiotics, or indoor plumbing. Your very survival would depend on navigating a world so radically different from today that it might as well be another planet. Let's start with something basic: your health. Imagine waking up with your usual morning headache. No aspirin, no coffee, no quiet. You're surrounded by shouting merchants, clanging metalwork, and maybe even the stench of an open sewer. Public sanitation. Not quite. The streets often doubled as latrines. In Rome, they had a sewer system, true, the cloaca maxima, but not everyone was connected to it, and waste management was primitive. In Greece, things were even more rustic. People often dumped refuse out of their homes into the street. You could literally be walking ankle-deep in waste, hoping not to contract dysentery, typhoid, or worse. Now let's talk about your diet. Think you're going to grab a protein smoothie or a latte. Not even close. Breakfast, if you're lucky, might be a piece of stale bread dipped in wine. In Rome, the elite could afford a more varied diet: olives, cheese, fruits, and maybe some fish. But for most, food was repetitive and, frankly, disgusting by modern standards. Meat was rare, heavily salted, and full of parasites. Milk was unpasteurized, meaning your morning cereal would likely come with a side of bacterial infection. Oh, and don't drink the water. It wasn't safe, not even close. And what about your body? Hygiene standards in both ancient civilizations were shocking by today's measures. The Romans did have public baths, which sounds nice, until you realize the water was reused for days and shared by hundreds, even thousands of people. Imagine a soup of sweat, skin cells, and bacteria. Soap. They used a mix of sand and oil. The Greeks preferred olive oil scrapes with astrigil. Good luck if you have acne or sensitive skin. Infections spread easily, and even a small cut could become deadly. No antiseptics, no antibiotics. Got a toothache? Say goodbye to that molar. If you're lucky, it'll be yanked out with metal pliers in a marketplace without anesthesia. Now, let's say you survive until midday. You'll need to watch what you say, and especially what you wear. In both Greece and Rome, clothing was minimal and mostly uniform. In Greece, men wore chitons, simple tunics. In Rome, the toga was a symbol of citizenship and class. But if you're dressed in the wrong fabric, length, or color, you're instantly suspicious. Women's clothing was even more regulated, and stepping outside alone could lead to public shaming. You could easily offend local norms just by how you stood, walked, or made eye contact. And if you were enslaved or poor, you had virtually no rights at all. A wealthy Roman could beat a slave to death without much consequence. In Greece, enslaved people weren't even allowed to speak in public forums. The moment you opened your mouth with a 21st century accent and zero knowledge of ancient customs, you'd be in trouble. Still think you could make it? Let's say you're summoned to court, or worse, to explain yourself to a city magistrate. You don't speak ancient Greek or Latin fluently. You have no idea what laws you've just broken. Maybe you insulted a god by accident, or failed to bow properly during a festival. Penalties ranged from public flogging to exile, or, if things escalated, execution. Trials in ancient Athens were loud, chaotic, and biased. Juries could consist of hundreds of citizens, shouting over one another and voting by casting stones. In Rome, justice often depended on who you knew and how much you could bribe. Oh, and don't count on your 21st century sense of equality or ethics to protect you. In both societies, women were second-class citizens. In Greece, respectable women rarely left the home. In Rome, they had slightly more freedom but were still legally dependent on male guardians. Homosexuality was viewed differently in each culture, but your modern identity categories wouldn't apply, and could even make you a target. Concepts like consent, mental health, or trauma. Not in the vocabulary. Your emotional well-being was nobody's concern. At this point, if you haven't starved, gotten sick, or been arrested, you might think about finding somewhere to rest. Think again. In most homes, especially among the lower classes, there were no beds as we know them. Just straw mats or wooden planks. No heating, no AC. Infestations of lice and fleas were common. Mosquitoes carried malaria. You couldn't just check into a hotel either. Inns were rare, and the ones that existed were dangerous, dirty, and often full of criminals. If you were on your own, you'd be lucky to find a place where you wouldn't be robbed or worse during the night. So, let's take stock. You've faced disease, dirt, bad food, harsh social rules, and a legal system that doesn't understand you. And we're only halfway through the day. Let's say, somehow, you've made it past the morning chaos. You've avoided disease, avoided offending the gods, and even managed to choke down some vinegary wine and stale bread. But now you're walking through the forum or the agora, and suddenly it hits you. Everyone is staring at you.
Why?
You're walking funny. Your posture, your gait, even your facial expressions scream, foreigner. In a world where identity meant everything, your name, tribe, family, status, you have none of that. You're a ghost. And ghosts were feared. Now imagine someone approaches you. Maybe a Roman patrician. Maybe a Greek philosopher. They start talking fast, in Latin or ancient Greek, and not the kind you learned in high school. You can't understand them. They assume you're stupid. Or suspicious. Or both. In societies that valued rhetoric and public speaking, being unable to speak eloquently could brand you as either a barbarian or a slave. If you're in Athens, you might get pulled into a debate about politics or ethics. Sounds fun, right? Except there are no microphones, no moderators, and no tolerance for hesitation. If you're in Rome, things are more brutal. Soldiers march through the streets, and the law is enforced through violence. Think police brutality with no body cams and no courts to appeal to. If you're caught breaking curfew or speaking disrespectfully, you're lucky to get away with a flogging. And then there's the entertainment. You might wander into a Roman arena, expecting some kind of theatrical show. What you get is a live execution or a gladiator battle, complete with blood, broken bones, and roaring crowds. People are laughing, cheering, eating grapes while someone gets mauled by a lion. Welcome to Roman leisure. Still think you'd make it? Just wait until sunset, when things get really dangerous. As night falls, your situation only gets worse. In modern cities, we take for granted that streets are lit, help is a phone call away, and doors have locks. But in ancient Greece and Rome, darkness meant danger. No street lamps. No police patrols. Just torches, shadows, and the constant threat of crime. If you were lucky enough to find shelter, it wouldn't feel safe. Walls were thin, security non-existent, and if someone wanted to break in, they could, and would. You'd also be dealing with a body under stress. No clean water all day. Likely dehydration. Your stomach might be rebelling against the oily, stale food. If you've got a fever or a wound, you're on your own. No hospitals. No help. Healers were a mix of superstition and guesswork. A doctor might bleed you or give you crushed animal parts to rebalance your humors. Good luck. And while you're trying to sleep, probably on a straw mat, swatting at fleas, you'll hear noises, drunk citizens yelling in the streets, wild dogs fighting over scraps, maybe even a religious procession passing by, demanding silence or participation. Ignore them. You risk angering the gods. Join in. You risk being seen as a fraud. So after one exhausting, filthy, dangerous day in ancient Greece or Rome, your chances of making it to the next sunrise are slim. You're a foreigner, an outsider, without language, resources, or immunity to local diseases. The truth is, their world wasn't built for someone like you, and unless you're a hardened time traveler with a stomach of iron and perfect Latin, you wouldn't last 24 hours.